10 reasons why you should buy a Smaulgld mug. Reasons to buy and hoard mugs. Number 1. Mugs have been used for drinking for more than 5,000 years. Number 2. They are finding more uses for mugs every day. Number 3. We could not live our lives without mugs. Number 4. The Russians and Chinese are buying mugs hand over fist. Number 5. Mugs are made in China. Number 6. Mugs are hard assets. Number 7. Mugs are real wealth. Number 8. Mugs cannot go to zero. Number 9. Mugs are portable. Number 10. Mugs are drinking vessels, period. Wait, there is more. You can mix Mountain House in a mug. You can carry your barter silver in a mug. You can do many things with mugs that you cannot do with fiat currencies. Measure your wealth in mugs. They have mugs at the offices of JP Morgan and central banks. That is all you need to know. When the excrement hits the fan, you'll want to have your Smaulgld mug close by. Buy your Smaulgld mugs today. Reasons to buy and hoard mugs. Number 11. You can stack mugs. As you can see here, mugs are stackable. Add to your mug stack today. Buy a Smaulgld mug. Reasons to buy and hoard mugs. Number 12. You can put coffee in a mug. As you can see here, someone very clever has done so. Buy a Smaulgld mug today. Reasons to buy and hoard mugs. Number 13. You can put cognac in a mug. As you can see here, someone is thinking of putting cognac in a mug. Buy a Smaulgld mug today. Reasons to buy and hoard mugs. Number 14. You can display a mug on a studio soundboard. As you can see here, someone has displayed a mug on a studio soundboard. This highlights how versatile mugs can be. Mugs can be put in countless places, and we intend to show you as many of those places as possible. Buy a Smaulgld mug today. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Smaulgld Subscribers Sound Off. And tonight I have a returning guest with me, the Wealth Watchman. I haven't had the Wealth Watchman on for a while. And the Wealth Watchman, some of you may remember, had a very, very popular YouTube channel. He would put out very high quality videos on gold and silver. And because they took so much time to make, he would put all his heart and soul into them. And that's why he didn't have a prodigious output, but the quality was there, and they came out about every 2 weeks, and people would wait for them. And then life happened, and Wealth Watchman got busy with work, busy with family, and I'm delighted to bring him back because this takes less of his time, but we can still get his wisdom and can ask him some questions. We're just not going to get the full treatment of a Wealth Watchman video, but I'm sure this will suffice for those of you Wealth Watchman fans out there. How you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Lewis. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, great to have you. Well, we're all concerned about silver. We've seen the price of silver drop. Every time it bangs its head above 17 or 18, we think, all right, finally it's over. The bottom's in, and now it's going to slowly drift up, and then boom, it's going to skyrocket. And well, we're right back down almost to where we were a couple of years ago. We've erased all of those gains. We're in the mid 1500s, $15 range. You know, that's a slip there. 1500 would be quite nice. But what we're seeing with these lower prices, and I know you've been following this, are the increase in the pickup in demand, especially in India. What do you make of that?
Well, it really seems like the old adage of the bargain hunters out east is as true as ever. They wait, and they're very patient, and they know that they have most of the year to get the gifts, the wedding gifts, the family gifts. They have time to wait for price to come to them because they really do a lot of their buying several times a year. And that seems to be the case again. And I see this as very good news for the long term, not for short-term price action. We all know that that's very artificial. But for the direction, the ultimate direction of silver and, of course, gold, going forward. I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing in India right now. You had a piece in the last week or so on the silver imports into India, and it was incredibly heartening because this is exactly what I want to see come out of India. I think in the first 4 months of the year that India had brought in nearly 3,000 metric tons. Now, 3,000 metric tons is basically what they brought in all year a couple of years ago. And that's why silver has not been able to get traction, because silver was in a glut that year because India held off on their buying. But India has now bought as much silver in the first third of the year as they did in all of basically 2016. So I'm very encouraged by this. In fact, if they keep going at this level, we will. It's very possible we could see a brand new all-time record, an all-time high in a stacking year, basically, for India. I think the previous record was about 8,500 tons. And this would be, several hundred tons beyond that. And I would encourage all the stackers to keep watching India every day, every month. And Lewis puts these reports out every month when he hears the new reports from India. So guys, watch Lewis for these new reports. This is really good news for all of us.
All right, now what we noticed in 2015, which was the record year, that was the year of record low silver prices. The year started out not too bad. I mean, it was in the 18s, and by the end of the year, it was down about 1,300. But what do you think is driving the demand other than price? I mean, just because it's less expensive, why do Indians even want silver?
Well, silver is still steeped in their heritage and their lore. It's really in their DNA. It's been part of their culture, their history for thousands of years. And yes, I do think it's still part of the duties, the taxes levied on gold. A 10% tax on gold means you have to fork up another $120, and a 10% tax on silver means you have to pay $1.50.
Right.
So considering the price and the tax and everything, I think that we are seeing India return to its roots, and that they are buying more silver for jewelry, because as we both know, people in the West like stacking bars and coins, but that's not how a lot of people in the East think, especially in India. They like buying gold jewelry and silver jewelry. They like buying, things you can wear at weddings. They like status symbol stacking. All right, they like status symbol, a jewelry. And you'll remember the report, several years ago of that Indian man who wanted to tell the ladies he was available. What did he do? He made a solid gold shirt, right? And he was sporting that because in their culture, that's like having the Bentley, wearing the Rolex. If you want to say, hey ladies, here I am, and this is what you're missing out on. You wear that ostentatious wealth on the outside. Well, go ahead.
Well, you're making an interesting point, because in the West, the stacking is not done for any type of ostentation. It's done as a protection against financial calamity, monetary debasement. But you're highlighting here is that Indians are buying silver and gold because they can and because they're wealthier.
Precisely. That's right, and that's a great point. There was this sort of prepper vibe to gold and silver, and it was mostly during the Obama years. And now that we're not being led directly off the cliff like we were, at least with the pedal to the metal, economically speaking, people are buying gold and silver more, especially out east, as you have put it before, because they have actually come into wealth. They're now actually wealthier than they were 20 or 30 years ago, and they want to put part of it in gold and silver. It is a protection, But as you've also said, it is a status symbol, and they're doing it because they have extra rupee. They have extra yuan, and they want to find places to put it in. And this historically seems like a very sound place. So I'm very heartened to see that India is returning to their old habit of silver as wealth, silver as jewelry. The more they do this, the more that will become more popular, and they will likely unleash something price-wise if they can, trigger that wholesale supply shortage. They will trigger something they did not intend to trigger, and when that happens, and if that happens in the near future, that will have other consequences that no one thought of. So it's really good news coming out of it. It doesn't feel like good news because you're looking at the price of silver. I got to be honest with all my Shield brothers out there, and with all your subscribers. I never look at the price of gold and silver, almost never. I look at it maybe once per week. And the reason why I do that is because I know that our enemies have both of those metals in a trading range. They want to keep silver between $15 to $18. They want to keep gold between $1,100 to $13. And until I start seeing buzz, in the investment community of a long-term breakout, I'm just not interested. I know that I'm making hay in other areas, and I'm not going to get bent out of shape hoping for something. I'm just going to wait for that to come to me because I know it will. So I really encourage a lot of our stacking warriors, don't get your hopes up every time there's a spike. Wait for silver to break 21 before you get excited. Wait for gold to break, maybe even, $1,400 or $1,500 before you can start to get excited again. We're nowhere near that, so don't worry. But I think we'll have a short-term turnaround soon. Looking at the COTs, historically you would look at these metals and they would be very oversold on a short-term basis.
Well, one of the things that I noticed when I was looking at the silver and gold demand, excuse me, the last year, the gold and silver demand for jewelry was twice the amount for investment. However, in 2015, that was a year, if you recall, that the U.S. Mint, the Canadian Mint, all the mints around the world had very, very strong silver sales. 47 million at the U.S. Mint, yes. Silver Eagles, 40 million Canadian silver maple leafs. Tremendous year. And that year, silver, I think it was like 270 million ounces went to silver, sovereign silver coins and bars and rounds. That's been cut down to about 120, 130. And we were having a point where the industrial metal and the investment metal demands were starting to crowd each other out, because in 2007, 2006, investment demand was about 5% of overall silver demand. It was nothing. They were selling 7 or 8, 10 million American Silver Eagles, and that was about it. But that went up 4 or 5-fold, and that stopped in mid-2016 and has been falling down ever since. In 2016, they sold 33 million American Silver Eagles. Last year, 18.6 million. This year, we're lucky if we sell 10 at the current pace. So precisely at the time where investment demand has gone down, at least we're having the industrial demand picking up. So what could happen in India is India could pick up, but what I was very focused on when you were talking is how the Indians are buying because they're wealthy, and that leads me into your comment about why people were buying, especially 2015. Obama had just been reelected. 2014, people were concerned. They were doing QE. So you had a lot of buying based on defense. But now it seems that the economy, at least the general narrative, forget poking through numbers and picking apart GDP and real unemployment and real inflation, the overall economy is saying 4.1% GDP, which is a big, big improvement. Now, if that's the case, and people are wealthier, or they're told they're wealthier, and they feel wealthier, could that convert in the United States, not necessarily into stackers revitalizing their stacks, which are adding on to them, which they might do if they come into a little more money. But could they add to this jewelry and ostentation? I mean, President Trump is probably the most ostentatious president we have ever had. If people wanted to emulate Trump, you would think they'd start buying the bling. Is that a possibility with this GDP? And where do you see the economy going? And do you think it will impact demand for gold and silver, either on the investment and or the jewelry or even the silverware side?
Sure. Good questions. I do think that it will start to have a real effect, especially on the silver side. And the reason why I say that is because we are finally bringing back a lot of factories, a lot of manufacturing jobs, and we're starting to build things again. And I know that that a lot of these factories, like the one he was visiting last night in Illinois, these steel factories, they're being reopened, and they're making just millions of tons of steel that they weren't making just 6 and 8 years ago. And I promise you, this new renaissance of manufacturing is going to have a major impact, at least on the industrial side in silver. Listen, one of the things that Trump has talked about that he hasn't talked about much since he's been reelected, but I promise you it's coming, is he spoke about the fact that we blew up bridges and roads in Iraq and Afghanistan while ours were falling apart. And then he promised a new multi, tens or hundreds of billions of dollars as a revitalization bill that would basically rebuild tons of bridges, tons of roads, tons of infrastructure, and the amounts of metal required, industrial metals of all kinds that will be needed to make that happen will literally boggles the mind. It's not just concrete. It's not just coke, steel. It's not just aluminum and coal that they're going to need. They're going to need everything, and silver will be a part of that. And we will definitely be seeing probably an uptick, on that side of things for that and other reasons. I don't think that Trump is really big on solar energy. I mean, I think that he likes other forms of energy, so I'm not entirely sure that we will see a huge uptick in the solar part here. We probably will continue to see it in other parts as well. But I also do think that people will start to want to acquire it as a status symbol as well, as you alluded to. That's what we're starting to see in a big way in the East, and I think that will transfer over here as well. Honestly, looking at the mint figures, yeah, they've come down, but really the mints, even at their height, even with like 47 million, U.S. silver eagles sold in 1 year, that's like
5%.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2 months of India's, jewelry buying.
Right. Even when you had to add in, but it was somewhat of a global phenomenon that year, because if you piece together not just the U.S. Mint, but all the other mints and all the other privately minted silver rounds and bars, it did get up to about 22-25%. But the U.S. Mint in and of itself, at its peak, even at 50 million, remember there's 820 million ounces, 880 million ounces mined a year, plus there's about another 80 or 90 million ounces in scrap. So yes, it isn't that big of a deal. And I do look at those mint numbers as symbolic of what retail demand, what the average investor is thinking of. And what I noticed recently, Wealth Watchman, is that the gold sales have picked up again the last 6 to 8 weeks in a fairly significant way. Silver, not yet. And I think that's more of I think gold is always a defensive metal first, and then silver, people start realizing gold may be too expensive. You had mentioned when you were talking about not looking at silver every day in the prices, you say you were making hay in other areas. You want to share with us what you mean by that? I think you were alluding to cryptocurrencies, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Well, that's one of the places that I have been involved in. I do own some cryptocurrencies, and I do still view them as highly experimental, and I do still view them as all of them are completely different. So anyone, getting involved in that has to do their own diligence. But, you know, last Christmas, cryptos were not a good buy. They had gone, they had gone too far, too fast. And now that they've come down, now that Bitcoin has come down, like 70%, where it was at just a month ago, around, like $6,000 or less. It was starting to become, a reasonably good value again. And there are others that had fallen more. I know Litecoin had fallen just, over 80%, but it went up further in that last stretch, especially in December when it went up about 500% in 2 weeks. It was absolutely astounding. So, this is another place that I have been looking in, and I have acquired both silver and specific choice cryptos. And I basically will shift attention to a place where I think I may not have enough of something. I have met all of my major silver stacking goals. And right now I am trying to retool and get ready for, for after a consolidation in the crypto world, probably another ascent. It just seems like that every week now we're getting some kind of new breakthrough of some bank being bought on behalf of cryptos, or some new regulation that came out from the SEC or whatnot, where they just say, yeah, we're going to regulate this and we're going to allow this. It's becoming apparent now that this is not something that they're just going to track everybody with and steal everything they have and arrest people and put people in jail. It's starting to become accepted in the broader investment community. It's gotten on the radar, and at some point we're going to see another turnaround because institutional investors are gearing up to get involved in this, and they're not saying when they're going to do it or how, because they don't want to ruin the chance to get in on terms they find favorable. But I think that this is definitely a place where, if you have a lot of gold and silver and you are looking to, put your money on another racehorse, then this is a good place to look. The Dow is at an all-time high. I'm just talking about as far as a value play. The Dow could go up another 10,000 points in the next year. It's a highly, volatile and a highly rigged thing. But the cryptos themselves, compared to the Dow, the cryptos are down about 2/3 where they were 5 months ago, and the Dow is at an all-time high. Silver is still a good value, but again, silver is not being allowed to break out. It is harder to rig the overall crypto market. Now, they take down Bitcoin because most of these others are a proxy of Bitcoin. If they can control Bitcoin, then they can take down the sector as a whole or exert great control over it. But that should not scare you long term, because like this Japanese sale, starting in December and going through like February, they had to sell massive amounts of Bitcoin in order to repay the creditors for the Mt. Gox exchange debacle. And that's basically through. That's basically done with. And once they've sold these coins, they're sold. They're out there. They can't just keep selling infinity short. They just can't short this to infinity like they can with silver. It's ridiculous what they do with silver and gold. It's criminal. But who's going to put them in jail? Especially if the regulators are in on it. So, I'm rooting for silver. I own silver. I think it's a good value play, but I think that we should attack these bankers from all sides. And I definitely see crypto as a viable angle of attack. One that they have a great deal of difficulty rigging, as opposed to gold and silver, which they rig very easily because they've been doing it for so long and they own most of it. So.
Well, now what's going to happen with regulation, though, isn't it going to be, if we start to see this merging of cryptos by banks, MasterCard issuing prepaid debit cards with cryptos on them, seeing Bitcoin ETFs eventually getting approved, just seeing this type of regulatory environment which allows institutional investors and banks to sell to them, doesn't that run the risk of the crypto or ICOs being regulated just like IPOs are today, public offerings, initial
Sure.
public coin offerings? Don't we run the risk of the same type of thing happening where there's a co-opting of these assets in the same way and making derivatives on them and futures exchanges and in a sense corralling them in the same way that they've corralled gold and silver?
That is a concern. In the end, though, several things are at play here. One, it is going to take quite some time for them to come up with whatever derivatives they think might be best. Concerning things like this Bitcoin ETF. Now, I do have some concerns about it. If it was the sort of thing that they were regularly audited and they had to actually, keep X number of coins at any given time in their storage, and be able to prove that and to be able to buy and sell, in order to basically, what they say they do in SLV and GLD, right? If they had it and it was audited and it was, then perhaps there's less of a danger with something like that. I'm very wary of ETFs, though, as a vehicle for direct exposure to an asset after the shenanigans that have been pulled in the precious metal ETFs. I just don't trust them. They're going to have to earn my trust. Trust is earned. They have not earned a thing. They have destroyed trust over many decades in these markets. They can rebuild it. But your question of will these banks be able to siphon off demand in ways, they might, find other means to, a release valve for a lot of this demand. Like you said, the debit cards and the credit cards, and there is that danger. I think though that there is more transparency though. That's the thing. We can watch wallets. We can watch where a lot of these coins are ending up. We can see where the majority of the everyday available coins and things like Litecoin and Bitcoin, we can actually almost watch that in real time. You don't always know who owns the wallet, but you can watch it move.
I would expect that if the ETFs ever get approved, that they would have to say that our 850 Bitcoin are in this wallet or in these various wallets and they're in cold storage, and that's it. And that they would not be allowed to see, because what I'm concerned about is because of the anonymity, they can move Bitcoin around, they can use them to short, they can do whatever they want, and you'll never know if they even have the Bitcoin. And that's basically what they can do with SLV and GLD and so on. So I'm just concerned that the regulation means that a lot of this gets surrounded by the entire financial apparatus. Now, on the flip side, though, the reason I think they want to do it is because they want the value that it represents. And I think what they want to do, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is a stock price, as you're talking about, that gets to a point where I don't know, I can't buy a Tesla anymore. The CEO is making me nervous. The cars are slamming in, exploding, the self-driving cars. They're not making that many. They're not making a profit. I'm not comfortable with the tents that they're making these things in. And so it's very hard to keep pumping that stock. Now, you can get the Swiss National Bank to buy some. You can get other foreign central banks to buy it. But there's a limit to how much you can push a company that doesn't make any profit. So you're right. Like at some point, Dow Jones, how high can it go? We've been surprised, but still, same with housing. You can't make a $250,000 house $9 million. It's just very hard to push that. You have to loan it, and you have problems. The reason I think they're going to push this crypto stuff, though, is there is no collateral, and who's to say how much Bitcoin is worth? I mean, there's no earnings. There's no earnings call. There's no Mr. Bitcoin that can make a fool of himself on an earnings call. There's no corporation. Even if they do ICOs, they can still value them on some type of pie in the sky valuation. So if they're going to do that, it's almost, it ties into a theory that I have, is that what the Fed and the bankers told you to do in 2009 and 10, very, very clear. They said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to print money. We're going to drive interest rates down to zero because we want to create a wealth effect. We want the stock market to go higher, 401ks, and we want real estate to go higher. And when people heard that, they're like, this is reckless. Screw this. I'm buying gold and silver. And that worked in 2009, 10, and 11. But then they smashed down those, and the other assets that they wanted, their preferred assets, housing took off. It's from 2011 and 12, hasn't looked back since. The stock market, same thing. So if you get the signals that they want cryptocurrencies, which I'm getting.
Yes, I am too.
That they want this thing to take off. They just want to regulate it. Well, then why fight it? I mean, you could fight it on the concept that I don't like digital assets and I am only going to have real wealth in stack, you know, all that. I get all that. But then there's other people on the other side of Wealth Watchman that are saying that these cryptos are going to take over the world. They're going to destroy central banking. I don't think they'll allow that. I think they'd rather co-opt the whole thing. I want to get your thoughts on where do you see this whole thing going? And if they are going to like corral it, is there a way to make money off of it?
Those are great questions too. I think at this point, they are just smart enough to know that crypto as a concept and as a utility really cannot be quashed. I mean, like normally when a challenger came up in the last couple hundred years, they would just squash it.
Right.
Unless you just confiscated almost every computer on Earth at once and destroyed them. And, you know, you can't get rid of all the copies of the ledger of Bitcoin. I mean, it's out there. And there's literally no destroying this genie, much less putting it back in the bottle.
Right. There's no one site. It's the way they could shut down e-gold. They found out where the gold was. They shut it down. They go confiscate the gold. They can't do that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's right. That's right. And that's why. So they see it as, you know, if they fought it, it would be a huge threat. If they embrace it and they try to get ahead of this thing, and they say, look, what if the future of who we are is finding a way to lend with cryptos, to use them for collateral for our customers.
Right.
You know, I guarantee you the first major bank in the United States that says, look, cryptos are here to stay, and here are our guidelines. If you own cryptos, the world is your oyster. You can get a great loan on these terms, or we will work with you. We will, but here's our terms. You can't keep them. You have to set them aside in this neutral place, and you can't access them, except under certain conditions. In the old days, they stored gold and silver. That's
right.
How banks came about.
And they gave you a certificate.
That's right. They gave you a certificate. And, if they're smart, the smart ones will employ someone to find out, how do we become the new cold storage vault, that, a site where you bring us your digital, code, your scarce digital code that everyone seems to want. And here's what you can buy with it. Here's what we'll lend you for it in fiat, since not everyone will be taking it. If you want a business loan and you want to, purchase all this stuff, you'll probably still have to use fiat to do a lot of that. And that will be a great way to exchange one for another. And believe me, they will be shaving off.
Right.
They will be shaving off some when they make that exchange for the exchange rates.
Right. So this is all incremental revenue they can get, because they can still do whatever they're doing. And this is all extra money, extra fees, extra derivatives, extra storage fees, extra trading fees that they can make. That why chase that away? The only reason I think they would chase it away is they couldn't properly regulate it. I think that's the reason they chased away this ETF today, because they didn't have a way of figuring out what was going on at all the exchanges. But I guarantee you, once they approve Poloniex or Coinbase and they become alternative trading platforms registered with the SEC, that's when the floodgates open up, because now the SEC can say, oh, we know what they're doing. And then they'll centralize. Now, this pisses off the crypto crowd, because this is not what this thing was meant to be. This wasn't meant to be centralized exchange trading, bankers involved, fees. But, you know, that's the way of the world. Now, you can create this other, you know, ecosystem, off-bank, off-exchange, lightning networks, decentralized exchange, peer-to-peer exchanges. That'll all happen. But I still think that the majority of this stuff is going to happen within the regulated, you know, it just seems that they're going to put incentives to do that, and they're going to try to disincentivize you to do the other stuff.
Well, think about this. You know, in the past, the banks have just basically made whatever they wanted to be money, or the accepted form of currency, something they already had, because it benefited them, and less so the common man.
Right.
Now, what I think we will end up seeing is that since the common man was mostly the ones in cryptos first, that you will see a kind of a reverse wealth effect for a lot of people, in that the banks will just basically have to decide to play ball. If you can't beat them, join them. And they won't, you know, in the 1870s, the banks were able to say, hey, gold is money now and silver is crap. We don't want your silver. You're going to have to dump your silver on the open market and bring us gold. And that absolutely kicked the teeth in of middle America back then, and it caused the Depression. But now they're going to be the ones coming to us. We are already holding, for those who do, a form of wealth, that you can use to spend or to save or store. They're going to have to play. They're going to have to find a way to play somewhat by our rules and accommodate the game we've already been in. They will be the somewhat late comers to this game. Now, not all the banks. Some of them will be smart, and some of them will adopt it sooner. But in many circles, this will still be resisted, until the last minute.
Well, what about the crypto people that make the money, have the money, actually, like we saw with the Litecoin Foundation and Token Pay, actually becoming part of and buying banks? We saw there's a founders fund that's going to put money in with Binance into a Maltese bank that is sanctioned by the Maltese government. So we're looking at this from the perspective of the banks are going to do this and the banks are going to do that. But there's also the people, the crypto people. What are they going to do? Are they going to move in on banking itself?
That is an excellent point. And I think the answer is yes. I think that the very wealthy crypto foundations and people who have just seen themselves as outsiders without a way to force themselves into what we know as the modern banking system, they saw themselves on the outside looking in. How can we change them if we don't have power? They have all the power. They have all the assets. How can we force them to change? They own all the regulators. Well, in this case, since many of us ended up being early adopters of this very new and experimental asset, we happen to be at the right place at the right time where we can effect change upon them. We can actually transform the way many things are done on the banking side, because we have, they were able to buy 10% share of this German bank because they had billions of dollars. Why did they have billions of dollars? Because Litecoin went from like 40 cents to $400 a coin. That's why they had billions of dollars.
And they can then use that to buy political influence on these committees that are deciding the future of the regulation of Bitcoin. They can buy banks. So be very interesting. I want to shift gears now, Wealth Watchman, because the other day, SGT report was just taken down with no warning. Now, we know that some of the content on SGT report could rankle some people. However, if you look at what YouTube puts out as its community guidelines, there's nothing on there, and I don't listen to it every day, but the stuff I've heard, or that supposedly the channel was taken down for, doesn't incite violence. It doesn't go against the community guidelines, nothing specifically. But today I was on Twitter, and you just see people say stuff. And I'm going to read you two tweets. This one is by Dr. Dina Grayson. We're going to tie this back into SGT report. Okay. This woman says, now she's married to former Congressman Alan Grayson. The only way to change the mind of real Donald Trump's brainwashed base is to stop the propaganda from Fox News and fake news websites such as InfoWars. Until then, will not be able to reach these people. So what she's saying is, we can't talk to these people. We have to shut down whatever they're listening to. Right. Let me give you one other one. This is Brian Krassenstein. This got 130,000 likes. Breaking. YouTube has just banned real Alex Jones from live streaming and removed InfoWars videos from their platform. I cannot love this enough. You see that Alex Jones? Lying and hate gets you nowhere. You lose. Now, what do you make of this? This mentality here is not, I don't like the content, so I'm going to debate it. Both of these people are saying, and there seems to be a lot of support for this, that if we can shut down what we don't like, we win. And that appears to be what happened to SGT reporters. Like, whatever he said that they didn't like, YouTube decided, well, we don't have to tell you. And there's 130,000 people that like the fact that they disallowed Alex Jones to live stream. What do you make of all this, and where is this heading?
That's really great topic that you just brought up. Sean's a good friend of mine. He does extraordinary work. He's put in, years, thousands of hours into that. And to watch that happen, to watch them give him that third strike and then kind of take down a channel with 1/3 subscribers, like it was nothing. That is where we have gotten, I believe, because our side finally has some real legitimacy and some real power, and we're starting to get that 100th, monkey effect, where enough people know our talking points. They know how to counter the other side's narrative. See, the neoliberal narrative was almost never questioned throughout the 20th century. The reason why is because they owned all the media. Okay, right. The mainstream media, what we call the fake news media, it doesn't exist to inform. It exists to mold and shape how you think about this reality that we're living in. And in a very real sense, they can make you believe almost whatever reality they want to especially in times past, because they had a very tight-knit narrative with no deviations from it whatsoever. So, Americans and Europeans and anyone else, they heard the same narrative from all sides, from so many different sources. They thought, well, this must be true, because all these sources are saying the same thing. I mean, who am I to say all 20 of these news places are wrong? Now we know better. The internet has allowed the decentralization of information. And now we have somewhat centralized counter-narrative institutions of news like YouTube, like channels like yours and Sean's and mine. Some of us have gotten so big that we're able to poke at holes in these mainstream narratives in real time. And when that's the case, when you can poke holes in our enemies' narratives in real time, the blindfold comes off, and suddenly people in the middle who just didn't care one way or the other start seeing all these incongruencies, all these things that don't match their experiences in life, don't match what they're hearing on the television screen. And then they hear other narratives and they start really listening to them. That's what has happened. And that is why they are desperate, as you say, to shut it down. Shut it down is a meme in many circles. People at the top, they don't have convincing enough arguments in and of themselves. They revert to name calling, and when that doesn't work, when calling you a racist and a bigot and a misogynist and a xenophobe and a homophobe and any other meaningless word that they want to call you, when that doesn't work and when that doesn't intimidate you, they just start shutting it down. We have seen platform after platform go after people just simply for privately held beliefs. We've seen, for heaven's sakes, we've seen Airbnb, ban people for life from even renting through their establishment or being a landlord through their establishment based on your political beliefs. I mean, that is really extreme. It's one thing to shut down someone's YouTube, and that's bad enough, or your Twitter account or your Facebook account. But when you have places like Airbnb and credit card places, like PayPal, like Stripe,
or Patreon too,
or Patreon, when they start shutting you down for your beliefs because they think it's quote unquote hate speech, you're in a very, very dangerous situation, because what they're able to do is say, well, we can't change your mind, so we're simply going to impoverish you. We're going to make it impossible for you to have an income, a living. And we're going to minimalize you and ostracize you from society. And I guarantee, and that's what they're doing to Sean.
Well, that's what the Chinese social credit system is. Basically, you can't get on a plane, you can't get on a train. There's certain things you just can't. You're not allowed to buy property if they don't like what you think. One of the problem I have with all this, I understand how a monolithic government would do that. I understand why the Chinese communists would do that, because that is their method of control. And I'm not surprised that they do it. What I'm surprised about is, and I'm not surprised that any government would try to quell dissent, would try to influence public opinion, mockingbird media, and we understand why they do that. What I'm fascinated by, though, is, and it seems to break very, very clearly. You're talking about average, everyday people on Twitter. And it seems that if you are on the left, you're all in favor of this type of censorship. You're clapping like a seal if something gets shut down that you don't like. And you see very few liberals, other than civil libertarians like Alan Dershowitz, who say, whoa, 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 you don't want this done against you either. They don't seem to care. They're more interested in just winning. And the way they win is the Callicles might makes right. We shut you down. Now you go away. These two comments that I read to you exemplify that. Now, what I do see on the right is they want to go to a college campus, not to go and pick a fight. They want to go there and express their ideas, and they don't want to hear it. And they're going to break windows. They're going to riot. And it's disturbing that when you have platforms, however, that are supposed to be platforms, and they do almost like this street fighting on the platform. Booting you off is equivalent to throwing you out physically out of the cafe where you're having a conversation. So, oh, we can't have that guy in here. And they throw him out. I don't see... Other than, the problem with all this is, we saw the tweet from Donald Trump saying he wants to get involved now because they say he's been shadow banned.
Yes, it's very encouraging. I mean, I wish you'd done this 6 months ago.
Well, this is what I want to get at, is what is the solution? Some people say you take, and I think the people that have been most impacted are saying you take YouTube, you take Twitter, you take these large entities, and you make them into public utilities. And basically, you have to let people say what they want, other than real violent things and real, I'm talking about real offensive things, not hurting someone's feelings, but, defamation or threatening to kill somebody, things like that. Or others say, let the free market take care of it. The problem I have with the free market thing is these companies don't make any money, or at least Twitter doesn't. So there's no benefit in going out and trying to compete against Twitter for the benefit of losing money. It almost seems like Twitter's out there as a platform rather than as a place to make money. But I would prefer that people would just look at alternative platforms, as opposed to begging these platforms to accept you, to allow you to stay. But I think you take a different view. I think you take the public utility view, don't you? And explain why.
Yes, I do, and this is something I had to come to grips with over time. For those people out there who didn't understand, maybe they're starting to understand Donald Trump's strategy more about trade. I know a lot of libertarians I respect say, "Oh my gosh, Donald Trump is doing tariffs? I mean, is it the 19th century? Like, what are we doing?" Well, now, we saw Europe come basically cap in hand saying, "Okay, Donald, we get it. We will lessen some of our tariffs on you, and we will buy more of your goods because we see you're really serious about pointing a trade gun back at us." They've all these countries have had their trade weapons pointed at us. These tariffs, these closed markets, these are weapons pointed at us, and we've just basically had our hands up for decades. That's not a free market.
No, I agree that those tariffs, the tariffs
that
Trump is doing weren't tariffs for tariff's sake because he wanted to institute mercantilism in 19th century, no free trade. He was actually, I think, using the tariffs to level the playing field to perhaps even get to free trade, because I think part of the EU conversations were maybe we eliminate tariffs. Yes. But now take that. I understand that, and that's trade.
So here's where I'm going with this. Yeah. Here's where I'm going with this. So, there really isn't free speech either. Okay, we had free trade. We didn't have free trade. We had fool's trade. Okay, we don't have free speech. We have fool's speech. You're able to say whatever the hell that a handful of corporations think you should say, and we have absolutely zero way to really fight back against it. I mean, you can do some boycotts and whatnot, but these people are so entrenched and they're so powerful that usually doesn't avail you very much. So we need to actually, they've been, like I've said, they've had weapons trained on us saying, don't say that. Don't say that. You can't say that. You're free to say whatever we want you to say. If you're going to have real free speech, you have to point weapons back at the other side, weapons that they will understand. You have to actually show them by force, by brute force, because that's all they understand. You have to show them they will allow speech to happen.
When you say brute force, you mean by law, by
yes,
executive order, stuff like that?
No. I would prefer law. I would prefer law. I mean, we should be a nation of laws. All right. And I think everyone wants. There are a place for executive orders, some of them, but we should be a nation of laws where one guy just can't say one thing and then it's law because he said it. I do, on the whole, appreciate when the process is allowed to work. There are exceptions to that, but what I'm saying is that we need some kind of way to tell the world that just like the Second Amendment wasn't just meant for muskets. It's meant for all types of firearms in all contexts. Okay, there's some liberals who say, this AR-15 was never covered by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was meant for muskets. That is what they're saying about speech. They're saying that, freedom of speech means that you can go out into the public square like they did in the 1700s.
You can write a pamphlet.
And yell at the top of your lungs, and anyone can hear you. That's not what speech really is in the 21st century. The public square isn't, where you go to be heard. You go to be heard on social media. Okay, that is the AR-15, the technological change that has happened, but the principle is the same. They're not carrying the principle forward. We're still stuck in musket mode when it comes to our First Amendment being honored. They won't let you say things in the only place that matters. They won't let you say the things you want to say and need to say in the modern public square, which is your Facebook account, your Twitter account, your Instagram account. I mean, I think Brittany Pettibone had her Instagram suspended today simply because she released a video with another activist. Basically saying that their court case in Austria was a success. So just for saying that, her account was shut down to tens of thousands of people. That is the real denial of our First Amendment rights. And the only way to really protect those rights is to force the people who have been given the sacred task of enabling many people to speak and engage with one another on a global platform, not to choose sides. It's one thing if they're breaking the law. It's one thing if someone's saying, making threats of violence, imminent violence against someone else. But that's not what's happening. We're seeing people shadow banned. We're seeing people's accounts deleted. What happened to Sean is not just a tragedy. It should be a crime. It should be a crime. You cannot selectively just start saying, well, we don't believe in freedom of speech for everybody. That has to be made illegal to do that.
Well, I think they could have, and it would have been okay if the first time they gave them the strike, they explained in detail that this is not allowed on our platform. I could have a problem with that, but at least I can say, okay, I understand. But what they did was they didn't tell them anything, and it was arbitrary. And the idea that somehow you're on there for your own benefit and they're giving it to you is not true, because you're on there, and when your stuff is monetized, they make money too. YouTube wouldn't be anything if there weren't people on there making creating content. They can say, well, I don't want this type of content. Then they got to tell you that they don't want your content, and not in this underhanded way of 3 strikes and you're out. But here's the question. Yes, okay, so you think that they need to have legislation that would make these things public squares, just like they can't kick if it's a public square, you're allowed to go there and you could say what you want. If these platforms are considered public squares and we had legislation, that could be a solution. Although I would prefer to see alternative platforms, but that doesn't exist right now. But what do you do now? Because Sean may have gotten his channel back, but we don't know why he lost it. And we also don't really know why he got it back. A lot of people complained, but
you're right.
So really, what is the solution absent legislation? I mean, a lot of people have said, oh, well, I'll start using these alternative platforms like Real Video and BitChute, and I kind of think that's a better thing. Is just to hedge your bets. Is like, it's the whole, I don't want to be a part of a club that doesn't want me, it would have me as a member. They don't want you there.
I absolutely agree. There's nothing wrong with building an alternative platform, on a quote alternative internet, alternative everything. I have no problem with that. The problem is it takes years or even decades for some of these alternate things to even reach the level of amplification that you're missing out on the entire time. The entire
point. Excuse me, but there's a good point there, because if elections are important and they happen every year, and you have to wait 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, those points of views that might have countered one party or another party from winning won't get heard. And I think that's exactly what they're trying to do with Facebook and some of the other platforms. They're trying to control the narrative.
Yes, that's right. And that's exactly it. They're trying to control the narrative. It's like we said, they lost the monopoly on the narrative. So the only way that they think they can do that is just to shut down everything on their platforms that goes against the preferred narrative. And Donald Trump won this tariff thing with Europe because when he proposed countermeasures, counter tariffs, it gave us something we didn't have against the other side in decades. It gave us leverage. It gave us real leverage. He used the tariffs as leverage. We have to have leverage over these enormous multi-hundred billion-dollar corporations like Google and YouTube and all these platforms. They are judge, jury, and executioner. As you say, they are very arbitrary. But even more than that, they are completely selective about who it is they want to shut down. They don't shut down the Bill Mayers of the world, the Bill Maher's of the world, for saying choice words. But they will shut down, someone on the other side for saying something, much less inflammatory. Right. But they'll ruin that person's life, and it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're some nobody or you're the CEO of Papa John's. If you come down on the wrong side of this thing, they will take you out. It doesn't matter how big you are. They can isolate you as a target.
Well, you can't create a law against that, though. I mean, that's a separate issue. That's not the same thing as controlling the social media platforms. That's a whole other kettle of fish there.
But what I'm trying to say, is that in every one of these instances, it's just a means of control over what people are allowed to think or say, and they only really do it with basically right-wing accounts. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen this on Twitter and on Facebook, and it's not going to change until they're made to change. And the tweet from the president today and from his son the day before, that's what got Trump's attention, is when Donald Trump Jr. Brought to his attention the day before that they're shadow banning the RNC chairwoman.
Well, they're also shadow banning one of the congressmen in the Freedom Caucus was claiming, I think it was Getz, was saying he was being shadow banned.
I'm certain that that's true. So they should just not, pick sides. They should just let people speak. That's what they really exist for, which they should exist for.
Well, they would make more money, I would think, as well, because that would be, quote, more inclusive, and more people would use the platform, more people would be on the platform. It just seems to me that they're not as interested in turning the profit as they are as pushing. They're trying to do two things at once, or maybe they're only trying to push the narrative, because shadow banning means if I want to hear stupid stuff, if I want to hear fake news, and I'm on your platform, that's my customer desire. Send me the fake news. Don't send me something else, because I'm not there. If I go into a restaurant, I want junk food, give it to me. Don't try to sell me the healthy option. But it doesn't matter how you characterize it. They're not serving the customer.
Sure.
But my whole issue with this is, can you make them serve the customer? And your point is, look, it's a monopoly platform. They kind of have to.
That's precisely it. That's precisely it. And I'll point out, this, my shoe brothers do not. I am shadow banned myself. I'm shadow banned on Twitter. Okay. And I toe the line on every single part of their terms of service. And I know those terms of service by heart, even though they change them every 3 months. I have to keep up with it because, they're trying to make it so hard to stay on their platforms that, they're trying to give themselves extra cover when they come down on you. So there's a lot of people, a lot of big people, much bigger than me, being basically QFD shadow ban, where this quality filter control thing where they cannot, no one can find your account unless they work extra hard to find it.
Right.
I mean, that's, and Twitter, even as they were denying the president's claim that they shadow ban people, they still admitted that they do, because
right.
They still hide your account. You have to look extra hard for it, So these people, they're panicking, Lewis. They're panicking because they don't control the narrative anymore. Donald Trump was not supposed to happen. He is the worst nightmare of these people who wanted this globalization, this new world order nonsense. These tariffs on Europe and him saying, yeah, why do we really need NATO? That all this stuff was not supposed to happen. They were just supposed to have another soulless puppet of the banksters in there. And he just came out of nowhere. He literally came out of nowhere. They're trying to make sure that Donald Trump never happens again.
Right. And also, if they can isolate it, that it's just him. The real issue, I think, is going to be in the 2018 elections, not whether it's Republican or Democrat, but will he have Trump-style representatives in the Beyond the Freedom Caucus? Because basically the establishment Republicans are no fan of Donald Trump either. The Corkers, the Flakes, McCain, Rubio. So we'll see what happens. But I want to thank you very much, Wealth Watchman, for joining me tonight on the Smaulgld Subscribers Sound Off show. And I really appreciate your insights on silver and India and China and the economy and censorship. And Wow, it's been a great show. I want to thank you. I hope you come back. And where can they? I know your output has been, your prodigious output has been reduced somewhat. Can they still go to the Wealth Watchman channel and expect to see a video?
Yes, they can. I'll be uploading this interview that we just did on my website when it's available on your website as well, and I will be uploading more new content as as time goes on, especially when something really key and critical happens. So go to thewealthwatchman.com. Sign up on the email list, sign up on the social media lists. It's all very important to be able to know when I put something out. I wish I could do it more often, but I have been able to make a few new pieces in the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, good.
So I hope to do that again.
All right. And I do want to make a push for, if you're going to go anywhere to find the Wealth Watchman, go to the website and sign up there. That's the place of last resort. You never know, you get taken down from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You may even get taken off your own website because your hosting provider may decide they don't want to deal with you. But that hasn't really happened yet.
Yes.
So I think you're always best off if you have a content provider that you like, support, send them money, be a patron. And actually, even Patreon or PayPal is a little problematic too, because they could kick people off there. So I'm just making a push that if you like your content providers, like the Wealth Watchman, go to the website first. Why? Because the YouTube is going to be on there. And in fact, I don't know if you have this, but what you might want to do, Wealth Watchman, is put a Twitter feed on your website. You can actually view your tweets right there. You could put a Facebook widget on there as well. So people start thinking about going to your site rather than all these other sites that you may not be a part of in the coming years.
Great idea. And Lewis, you do a great job. Your interviews, your questions are always very thoughtful, very professional. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being a good friend and for being a good fellow truth teller.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we will talk to you soon.
Take care. Look forward to it.